Hey guys, this is Allison from Alleycat Creations. How are you? Still here. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. And if you get anything from my work, a connect the dot, an epiphany, a light bulb moment, anything of that sort, a new author to read, a new book to explore, please consider supporting my work. It's very vital that we get this information out and pluck the truth out of it all. I also want to thank everybody with the utmost gratitude for those of you who have been helping me. I'm alive. I have my lights on. I have the internet, and it's a blessing. So I really do want to thank those who have been supportive from this whole entire journey. Blavatsky, The Secret Doctrine. So I made an oopsie because I'm dyslexic, by the way. And I didn't realize that it like cut in between, and I still have stanza 6 to go through. So I didn't finish it, as the one of my video titles may make that claim. No, didn't finish it. It was just a pause and an explanation of what most philosophers and big thinkers do when they read other books and have to call people out on it, on their oopsies. So that was that case. So I'm going to continue on stanza 6, the 6th verse. The curse is pronounced. They will be born in the 4th race, suffer and cause suffering. This is the first war. I'll keep my comments to myself this time. It is a universal tradition that before the physiological fall, propagation of one's kind, whether human or animal, took place through the will of the creator, creators, or of their progeny. It was the fall of spirit into generation, not the fall of mortal men. It has already been stated that to become a self-conscious spirit, the latter must pass through every cycle of being, culminating in its highest point on earth in man. Ditto. Spirit per se is an unconscious negative abstraction. Its purity is inherent, not acquired by merit. Hence, as already shown, to become the highest Diane Kohan, it is necessary for each ego to obtain full self-consciousness as a human. Consciousness being, which is synthesized for us in man. The Jewish Kabbalists, arguing that no spirit could belong to the divine hierarchy unless Ruach, spirit, was united to Nefesh, living soul, only repeated the Eastern esoteric teaching. Quote, a Dhyani has to be an Atma Buddha. Once that Buddha Manas breaks loose from its immortal Atma, of which it Buddhi is the vehicle, Atman passes into non-being, which is absolute being, end quote. This means that the purely nirvanic state is a passage of spirit back to the ideal abstraction of beingness, which has no relation to the plane on which our universe is accompanying its cycle. Pause. This was explained very in a different type of way in the Realms of the Living Dead that I read the other day. Go check that book out. I didn't get that far in. I'm only up to chapter 5, but it walks you through this cycle a little bit, and it might be easier to understand. Quote, the curse is pronounced, end quote, does not mean in this instance that any personal being, God or superior spirit, pronounced it, but simply that the cause which could but create bad results, had been generated, and that the effects, sorry guys, of a karmic cause could lead the beings that counteracted the laws of nature and thus impede her legitimate process only to bad incarnations, hence suffering. There were many wars, refers to several struggles of adjustment, spiritual, cosmical, and astronomical, but chiefly to the mystery of the evolution of man as he is now. Power's pure essence that we're told to create is a sentence that relates to a mystery explained, as already said, elsewhere. It is not only one of the most hidden secrets of nature, that of generation, over whose solution that embryologists have vainly put their heads together, but likewise a divine function that involves the other religions, or rather dogmatic mystery, the fall of the angels, as it is called. Satan and his rebellious host would have thus proved, when the meaning of the allegory is explained, to have refused to create physical man, only to become the direct saviors and creators of divine man. The symbolical teaching is more than mystical and religious. It is purely scientific, as will be seen later on. For instead of meaning a mere blind functioning medium, impelled and guided by fathomless law, the rebellious angel claimed and enforced his right of independent judgment and will, his right of free agency and responsibility, since man and angel are alike under karmic law. And there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the dragon was cast out, the old serpent called the devil, and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. The Kabbalistic version of the same story is given in the Codex Nazarus, the scripture of the Nazarenists, and real mystic Christians of John the Baptist, and the initiates of Christos. Bahak Zov, the father of the genie, is ordered to construct creatures to create, but as is ignorant or Orcus, he fails to do so and calls in Fetahil, sorry guys, I don't know if I'm saying that right, a still purer spirit to his aid, and who fails still worse. This is repetition of the failure of the fathers, the lords of light, who fail one after another. We will now quote from our earlier volumes. Quote, then steps on the stage of creation the spirit of the earth, so-called, or the soul, Psyche, which St. James calls devilish. The lower portion, the Amma Mundi, or astral light. With the Nazarenists, and the Gnostics, the spirit was feminine. Thus, the spirit of the earth perceiving that from Vadahil, the newest man, the latest, the splendor was changed, and that for splendor existed, decreased and damaged. She awakes Karabtanos, who was frantic and without sense judgment, and says to him, arise, see the splendor light of the newest man has failed to produce or create men. The deceased of the splendor is visible. Rise up upon and come with the mother, the spiritus, and free them from limits by which thou art held, and those more ample than the whole world. After which follows the union of the frantic and blind matter, guided by the insinuations of the spirit, not the divine. Sorry, guys, I can't project today. Divine breath, but the astral spirit, which by its double essence is already tainted with matter. again, that book spoke about the double astral yesterday. An offer of the mother being accepted, the spirit is conceived 7 figures, and the seven stellar planets, which represent also the 7 capital sins. The progeny of an astral soul separated from its divine source, spirit, and matter, the blind demon of conspicuousness. Seeing this, Fatahil extends his hand towards the abyss of matter and says, "Let the earth exist just as the abode of the powers he existed." Dipping his hand in the chaos, which he condenses, he creates our planet. Then the Codex proceeds to tell how Bahak Zoev was separated from the spiritus, and the genie, or angels, from the rebels. Then Mano, the greatest, who dwells with the greatest Pharaoh, called Kebar Zarv, known also by the name Zabat Zvar, Bar Inun Ifinin, sorry guys, helm and vine of the food of life. He, being the third life and commensurating and the rebelliousness and foolish genie on account of the magnitude of the ambition, says, "Lord of the genie, see what the genie, the rebellious angels, do about what they are consulting. They say, let us call for the world and let us call the powers into existence. The genie are the principles, the sons of light, but thou art the messenger of life. And in order to contract the influences of the 7 badly disposed principles, the progeny of Spiritus, the mighty lord of splendor, produces 7 other lives, the cardinal virtues, who shine in their own form and light from on high, and thus reestablish the balance between good and evil, light and darkness. Here one finds a repetition of the early allegorical dual systems as a Zoroastrian, and detects a germ of the dogmatic and dualistic religious of the future, a germ which has grown into such a luxuriant tree of ecclesiastically Christianity. It has already the outline of 2 supremes, God and Satan, but in the stanzas no such idea exists. Most of the Western Christian Kabbalists, preeminently Officius Levi, in their desire to reconcile the occult sciences with church dogmas, did their best to make of the astral light only preeminently the pleroma of early church fathers, the abode of the hosts of the fallen angels, of the archons and powers. But the astral light, while only the lower aspects of the absolute, is yet dual. It is the anima mundi, and ought never to be viewed otherwise except for the Kabbalistic purposes. The differences which exist between its light and its living fire ought to be ever present in the mind of the seer and the psychic. The higher aspect without which only creatures of matter from the astral light can be produced is this living fire, and it is the 7th principle. It is said in Isis Unveiled, in the complete description of it. The astral light, or anima mundi, is dual and bisexual. The idea, male part of its purely divine and spiritual, is the wisdom. It is spiritual and Purusha, while the female portion, the spiritus of the Nazarenes, is tainted in one sense. The matter is indeed matter, and therefore is evil already. It is the life principle of every living creature, and furnishes the astral soul, the fluid perisperut, to men, animals, fowls of the air, and everything living. Animals have only the latent germ of the highest immortal soul in them. This later will develop only after a series of countless evolution, the doctrine of which evolution is contained in the Kabbalistic axiom. A stone becomes a plant a beast a man a spirit, and spirit a god. The 7 principles of the Eastern initiates had not been explained when Isis was written, but only the three Kabbalistic faces of the semi-esoteric Kabbalah. But these contain the description of the mystic natures of the first group of Diana Kohans in the regime Ignis, the region and rule or government of fire, which group is divided into three classes, synthesized by the first, which makes four, or the tetrachris. If one studies the comments attentively, he will find that the same progression in the angelic natures, from the passive down to the active, the last of these beings being as near to the Akamara element, the region or plane wherein egoship or the feeling of I amness is beginning to be defined. At the first ones are near to the undifferentiated essence. The former are arupa, incorporeal, the later rupa, corporeal. In volume 2 of Isis, the philosophical systems of the Gnostics and the primitive Jewish Christians, the Nazarenes, and the Ebionites are fully considered. They show the views held in those days outside the circle of Mosaic Jews about Jehovah. He was identified by the Gnostics with the evil rather than the good principle. For them, he was Idabaoth, the son of darkness, whose mother Sophia Arkmoth was the daughter of Sophia, the divine wisdom, the female Holy Ghost of the early Christians. Akasha, while Sophia Akmoth personified the lower astral light or ether, Idabaoth, or Jehovah, is simply one of the Elohim, the seven creative spirits, and one of the lower Siftaroth. Geez, my goodness. He produces from himself seven other gods, stellar spirits, or the lunar ancestors, for they are all the same. They are all in his own image, the spirits of the face, and they reflect the reflections of one another, and have come darker and more material as they successfully recede from their originator. There also inhabit seven regions disposed like a ladder, as its rungs slope up and down the scale of spirit and matter, with pagans and Christians, with the Hindus and Chaldeans, with the Greek as with the Roman Catholics. With a slight variation of the texts in their interpretations, they all were the genii of the seven planets, as of the seven planetary spheres, or our septenary chain, of which Earth is the lowest. The connections, the stellar and the lunar spirits, with the higher planetary angels and I can't pronounce that, seven rishis of the stars, or of the Hindus, as subordinate angel messengers to these rishis. The emanations are the descending scale of the former, such in the opinion of the philosophical Gnostics, were the god and the archangels now worshipped by the Christians. The fallen angels in the legend of the war in heaven is thus purely pagan in its origins and comes from India via Persia and Chaldea. The only reference to it is the Christian canon is found in Revelation, as quoted a few pages back. Thus, Satan, once he ceases to be viewed in the superstitious, dogmatic, unphilosophical spirit of the churches, grows into the grandiose image of one man who made of terrestrial or divine man, who gave him throughout the long cycle of Mahakalepa the law of the spirit of life, and made him free from the sin of ignorance, hence of death. Which is really interesting because I just watched a show on this very topic. Sinks. Still stanza 6. The older wheels rotated downward and upward. The mother's spawn filled the whole cosmos. There were battles fought between the creators and the destroyers, and battles fought up for space, the seed appearing and reappearing continuously. Here, having finished for the time being with our side issues, which, however they may break the flow of the narrative, are necessary for the elucidation of the whole scheme, the reader must return once more to cosmogony. The phrase older wheels refer to the worlds or globes of our chain as they were during the previous rounds. The present stanza, when explained esoterically, is found embodied entirely in the Kabbalistic works. Therein will be found in the very history of the evolution of those countless globes which evolved after a periodical pralaya, rebuilt from old material into the new forms. The previous globe disintegrated and reappeared, transformed and perfected for a whole new phase of life. Think about what's happening now. New paradigm shift, new earth. In the Kabbalah, worlds are compared to sparks which fly from under the hammer of the great architect law, the law which rules all the smaller creators. The following comparative diagram shows the identity between the two systems, the Kabbalistic and the Eastern. The three upper are the three higher planes of consciousness, revealed and explained in both schools only to the initiates. The lower ones represent the four lower planes, the lowest being our plane, or the visible universe. These 7 planes correspond to the 7 states of consciousness in man. I just read that in the realms of the living dead. It remains with him to attune to 3 higher states in himself, to the 3 higher planes in cosmos. But before he can attempt to attune, he must awaken the 3 seats to life and activity. And how many are capable of bringing themselves to even a superficial comprehension of Atma Vidya, spirit knowledge, or what is called by the Sufis Rohans. The reader will find a clear explanation of the above in the commentary the man plant. So guys, I'm going to share screen so you can see what I am talking about. So put it up there if you guys want to pause it. Now I got to move this back. The seed appears and disappears continuously. Here, seed stands for the world germ, viewed by science and as material particles in a highly attenuated condition, but in occult physics as spiritual particles, supersinuous matter existing in a state of primeval differentiation. In theogony, every seed is ethereal organism, from which evolves later as a celestial being or God. In the beginning, that which is called the mystic phraseology, cosmic desire, evolves into absolute light. Now, light without any shadow would be absolute light. In other words, absolute darkness, as physical science seeks to prove. That shadow appears under the form of primordial matter, allegoricized, if one likes, in the shape of the spirit of creative fire or heat. If rejecting the poetical form and allegory science chooses to see in this primordial fire mist, it is welcome to do so, whether one way or another, whether Fohat or the famous source of science, nameless and as difficult of a definition our Fohat himself, that something caused the universe to move with a circular motion, as Plato has it, or as the occultation expresses it. The central sun causes Fohat to collect primordial dust in the form of balls, to impel them to move in converging lines, and finally to approach each other and aggregate. Book of Daizan. Being scattered in space without order or system, the world germs comes into frequent collision until they finally have final aggregation, after which they become wanderers, comets. Then the battles and struggles begin. The older bodies attract the younger, while others repel them. Many perish, devoured by their stronger companions. Those that escape become worlds. We have been assured that there exist several modern works of speculative fancy upon such struggles for life in sidereal heaven, especially in the Germanic language. We rejoice to hear it, for ours is an occult teaching lost in the darkness of archaic ages. We have treated of it fully in its Isis Unveiled, and the idea of Darwinian-like evolution of struggle for life and supremacy, and of the survival of the fittest amongst the hosts above as the hosts below, runs throughout both volumes of our earlier work, written in 1876. But the idea was not ours. It is that of antiquity. Even the Puritanic writers have ingeniously interwoven allegory with cosmic facts and human events. Any symbologist may discern the astronomical allusion, even though he be unable to grasp the whole meaning. The great wars in heaven is in the Puranas, the wars of the Titans in the Hesiod and other classical writers. The struggles also in the Egyptian legend between Osiris and Typhon, and even those in the Scandinavian legends, all refer to the same subject. Norse mythology refers to it as the Battle of the Flames, the sons of Muspel, who fought on the field of Wigrid. All these relate to the heaven and earth and have a double and often even a triple meaning, esoteric application to things above as to things below. They relate severely to the astronomical, theonical, and human struggles, to the adjustment of orbs and the supremacy among nations and tribes. The struggle for existence and the survival of the fittest reigned supreme from the moment that the cosmos manifested into being, and could hardly escape the observant eye of the ancient sages. Hence the incessant fights of Indra and the god of the firmament, with the Asuras, degraded from high gods into the cosmic demons, and with the Vriti, or Ahai, the battles fought between stars and constellations, between moon and planets, later and incarnated as kings and mortals. Hence also the war of heaven of Michael and his hosts against the dragon, Jupiter, and Lucifer, Venus. When a third of the stars and of the rebellious hosts were hurried down into space, its place was found no more in heaven. As said long ago, this is the basic and fundamental stone of the secret cycles. It shows that the Brahmins and the Taim speculated on the creation and development of the world quite in a Darnistic way, both anticipating him and his school in the natural selection of species, the survival of the fittest, and transformation. There were old worlds that perished, conquered by new. The assertion that all the worlds, stars, planets, as soon as a nucleus and primordial substance in the Laya, undifferentiated state, is informed by the freed principles of a just deceased sidereal body, become first comets, then suns to cool down to inhabit worlds, is a teaching as old as the rishis. Thus the secret book distinctly teach, as we see, as astronomy, that would not be rejected even by the modern speculation could the latter thoroughly understand the teachings. For archaic astronomy and the ancient physical and mathematical sciences expresses views of identical with those of modern science and many of the far most momentous import. A struggle for life as a survival of the fittest in the worlds above, as on our planet here below, are distinctly taught. This teaching, however, although it not be entirely rejected by science, is surely to be repugnated as an integral whole, for it avers that there are only 7 self-born primordial gods, emanated from the Tritarian one. In other words, it means that all the worlds are sidereal bodies, always on strict analogy, are formed one from the other after the primordial manifestation of the beginning of the great age is accomplished. The birth of the celestial bodies in space is compared to a crowd or multitude of pilgrims at the festival of the fires. 7 Yeah, I can't with this book today. Ascetics appear on the threshold of the temple with 7 light sticks of incense. At the light of these, the first row of pilgrims light their incense sticks, after which every ascetic beings whirling his stick and around his head in space, and furnishes the rest of the fire. Thus, with the heavenly bodies, Alaya center is lighted and awakened into life by the fires of another pilgrim, after which the new center rushes into space and becomes a comet, and is only after losing its velocity and hence its fiery tail that the fiery dragon settles down into the quiet instead of life as regular respectable citizens of the sidereal family. Therefore it is said, born in the unfathomable depths of space, out of the homogeneous element called the world soul, every nucleus of cosmic matter suddenly launched into being begins life under the most hostile circumstances. Through a series of countless ages, it is to conquer for itself a place in the infinitudes. It circles around and around between denser and already fixed bodies, moving by jerks and pulling towards some given point or center that attracts it, trying to avoid like a ship drawn into a channel dotted with the reefs and sunken rocks, other bodies that draw and repel in return. Many perish, their mass disintegrating through stronger masses, and when born within a system chiefly within the insatiable stomachs of various suns. Those which move slower and are propelled into the elliptical course are doomed to annihilation sooner or later. Another moving in parabolic curves generally escape destruction owing to their velocity. Some very critical readers may perhaps imagine this teaching as to the commentary stage passed through by all heavenly bodies in the contradiction with the statements just made as to the moon being the mother of the planet Earth. They will perhaps fancy the intuition of needed to harmonize the two, but no two intuition is truth required. What does science know of comets, their genesis, growth, and ultimate behavior? Nothing, absolutely nothing. And what is there so impossible that a Alaya center, a lump of cosmic protoplasm, homogeneous and latent, was suddenly animated or fired up, should rush from its bed into space and whirling throughout the abysmal depths in order to strengthen its homogeneous organism by the accumulation and additional of differentiated elements? And why should not such a comet settle in life, live, and become an inhabited globe? The abodes of Fohat are many, it is said. He places his 4 fiery electro-positive suns in the 4 circles. These circles are the equator, the ecliptic, and the 2 parallels of declination, or the tropics, to preside over the climates of which are placed the 4 mystical entities. Then again, other 7 suns are commissioned to preside over the 7 hot and 7 cold lokas, the hells of the Orthodox Brahmins. At the 2 ends of the egg of matter are Earth and its poles. The 7 lokas are also called the rings, elsewhere, and the circles. The ancients made the polar circles 7 instead of 2 as Europeans do, for Mount Meru, which is the North Pole, is said to have 7 gold and 7 silver steps leading to it. The strange statement made in one of the stanzas, the songs of Fohat and his sons are radiant as the noontide sun and the moon combined, and that the 4 suns on the middle 4-fold circle saw that Father Songs and heard his solar senelic radiance, is explained in the commentary in these words: the aggregation of the Fohat forces at the 2 cold ends, north and south poles, of the earth, which result in a multicolored radiance of night, having there several of the properties of ether, color, and sound as well. Sound is the characteristic of ether. It generates air, the property of which is touch, which is by friction becomes productive of color and light. Vishnu Purana. Perhaps the above will be regarded as archaic nonsense, but it will be better comprehended if the reader remembers the Aurora Borealis and australs, both of which take place at the very centers of terrestrial electric and magnetic forces. The 2 poles are said to be the storm houses, the receptacles and liberators at the same time of the cosmic and terrestrial vitality, electricity, from the surplus of which the earth had not been for those 2 natural, safe valves, but have been rent to pieces long ago. At the same time, it is now a theory that it has lately become an axiom that the phenomena of polar lights is accompanied by and produced of strong sounds like whistling, hissing, and cracking. Very, very interesting. This is, I hope, to the last stanza. 7. Make thy calculations, O Lano. And we see him in the Rainbow Masters, the Phoenix Journals. If thou wouldst learn the correct age of thy small wheel chain, its 4th spoke, its mother earth, reach the 4th fruit of the 4th path of knowledge that leads up to nirvana, and thou shalt comprehend, for thou shalt see. The small wheel is our chain of spheres, and the 4th spoke is our earth, the 4th in the chains. It is one of those on which the hot positive breath of the sun has a direct effect. To calculate its age, however, as the people is asked to do in the stanza, is rather difficult, since we are not given the figures of the great Kapla and are not allowed to publish those of our small yugas except the approximate duration of these. The older wheels rotated for 1 eternity and 1/2 of an eternity. It says, we knew that by eternity, the 7th part of 311.40 billion years, or an age of Brahma, is meant. But what is of that? As we know that the beginning with it, if we take for our basis the average figures, we have first all the eliminated from the 100 years of Brahma, 2 years taken up by the Sandhyas, twilights, which leaves 98, which we will bring it to the mystical combination 14 times 7. But we have no knowledge at what time precisely the evolution and formation of our little earth began. Therefore, it is impossible to calculate its age unless the time of its birth is given, which the teachers refuse to do so far. At the close of this book, and in book 2, however, some chronicle hints will be given. We must remember, moreover, the law of analogy holds good for the worlds, as it does for men, and as the one deity becomes 2 diva or angel, and 2 becomes 3 or man, etc. So we are taught that the Kurds world stuff become wanderers, comets. These become stars, and the star centers of vortices are suns and planets, to put it briefly. But there are 4 grades of initiation mentioned in esoteric works, which are known respectively in Sanskrit as the Skraptopana, Saradagam, Anagrarin, and Arham. The four paths to nirvana, and I totally butchered those words, I do apologize. In this, our fourth round bearing the same appellations. The Arhan, though he could see the past and the present and the future, is not yet the highest initiate. For the adept himself, the initiated candidate, becomes Chela, pupil, or to a higher initiate. 3 further higher grades have to be conquered by the Arhan, who would reach the apex of the letter of Arhatiship. There are those who have reached it even in the 5th race of ours, but the faculties necessary for the attainment of these higher grades will be fully developed in the average aesthetic only at the end of this root race and in the 6th and 7th. Thus, there will always be initiates in the profane till the end of the minor Manavatra, the present life cycle. The Arhats of the fire mist of the 7th rung are but one removed from the root race of their hierarchy, the highest on earth in our terrestrial chain. These root base has a name which can only be translated by several compounded words in English. The ever-living human Brahmin, the wondrous being descended from a high region, they say, in the early part of the 3rd age, before the separation of the sexes of the 3rd race. This 3rd race is sometimes called collectively the sons of passive yoga. It was produced unconsciously by the 2nd race, which, as it was intellectually indicated in an active, is supposed to have been consistently plunged into a kind of blank or abstract contemplation as required by the conditions of the yoga state. In the first or earliest portion of the existence of the 3rd race, while it was yet in its state of purity, the sons of wisdom, who as well will be seen incarnated in the 3rd race, produced by Kriyasky, a progeny called the sons of Ad, or the fire mist, the sons of will and yoga. They were the conscious production of a portion of the race, was already animated with the divine spark of spiritual superior intelligence. It was not a race, this progeny. It was at first a wondrous being called the initiator, and after him a group of semi-divine and semi-human beings, set apart in archaic Genesis. From certain purposes, they are those whom are said to have incarnated the highest Dhyans, Munis, and Rishi from previous Manvatras, to form the nursery for future human adepts on this earth and during the present cycle. These sons of will and yoga, born, so to speak, in an immaculate way, remained, it is explained, entirely apart from the rest of mankind. The being just referred to, which has to remain nameless, is the tree from which its subsequent ages are the great historically known sages and hierophants, such as the Rishi, Kapila, Hermes, Enoch, Orpheus, etc., have branched off. As objective men, he is the mysterious to the profane, the ever invisible, yet ever present personage, about whom legends are rife in the East, especially among the occultists and the students of the sacred science. It is he who changes from, yet remains ever the same, and it is again who holds spirit away over the initiated adepts throughout the whole world. He is, as said, the nameless one who has many names, yet whose name and whose very nature are unknown. He is the initiator, called the great sacrifice. For sitting at the threshold of light, he looks into it from the circle of darkness, which he will not cross, nor will he quite his post till the last day of the last cycle. Why does the solitary watcher remain at his self-chosen post? Why does he sit by the fountain of primeval wisdom, of which he drinks no longer, as he's not to learn, which he does not know? I, neither on this planet nor in its heaven, because the lonely, sore-footed pilgrims on their way back to the home are never sure to last a moment of not losing their way in the limitless desert of illusion and matter called earth life, because he would fain show the way to the region of freedom and light, from which he is a voluntary exile himself, to every prisoner who had succeeded in liberating himself from the bonds of flesh and illusion. Because in short, he is and has sacrificed himself for the sake of mankind, though but a few elect may profit from the great sacrifice. If under the direct silence guidance of the Maha, great Guru, that all the other less divine teachers and instructors of mankind become, from the first awakening of human consciousness, the guides of early humanity. It is through these sons of God that infant humanity got its first notions of all the arts and sciences as well as the spiritual knowledge. And it is they who have laid the first foundation stone of the ancient civilizations that puzzle so sorely our modern generation of students and scholars. Although these matters were barely hinted in the Isis Unveiled, it will be well to remind the reader that it was said in Volume 1 concerning a certain sacred island in the Central Asia, and refer him further details to the chapter in Book 2 on the sons of God and the sacred island. A few more explanations, however, though thrown out in fragmentary form, may help the student to obtain a glimpse into the present mystery. To state at least the one detail concerning these mysterious sons of God in the plain words, it is from them the Brahmaputas and that divine Dwajas, the initiate Brahmins of old justly calmed descent, while the modern Brahma would have the lowest castes believe literally that they had issued direct from the mouth of Brahma. This is the esoteric teaching, which adds moreover that although these descendants, spiritually of course, from the sons of will and yoga, became in time divided into opposite sects, as their Kriyashki, the progenitors, did themselves later on, yet even the degenerate descendants have down to this present day retained a veneration and respect for the creative function and still regard it in that light of religious ceremony, whereas the more civilized nations considered it as mere animal function. Compared the Western view and practice in the matters with the intuitions of Manu in regard to the laws of Grihasta in married life. The true Brahmin is thus indeed he whose sevenfold forefathers have drunk the justice of moon planet Soma, and who is Trisparana, for he has understood the secret of the Vedas. And to this day, such Brahmins known during the early beginnings, psychic and physical intellect, being dormant and conscious, still undeveloped, the spiritual conceptions of the race were quite unconnected with the physical surroundings. The divine man dwelt in his animal through externally human form, and if there was an instinct in him, no self-conscious could come to enlighten the darkness of the latent fifth principle. When moved by the law of evolution, the lords of wisdom infused into him the spark of consciousness. The first feeling it awoke to life and activity was a sense of solidarity, of oneness with his spiritual creators. As the child's first fleeting is for its mother and nurse, so the first aspirations of the awakening consciousness to primitive man were for those whose elements he felt within himself and who yet were outside and independent of him. Devotion arose out of that feeling and became the first and foremost motor to his nature, for it is the only one which is natural in his heart, which is innate in us, in which we find alike in human babe and the young of an animal. This feeling of irreplaceable, instinctive, aspirative, and imprimitive man is beautifully, in one way, say, intuitionally described in Carlyle. The great antique heart, he exclaims, how like a child's in simplicity, like a man in earnest solemnity and depth, Heaven lies over him, whosoever goes or stands on the earth, making all earth a mystic temple to him. The earth's business, all kind of worship, glimpses of bright creatures, flesh in the common light. Angels yet hover, doing God's messages among men. Wonder, miracle encompasses men. He lives in the element of miracle, a great law of duty, high as those two infinitudes, heaven and hell, dwarfing all else, annihilating all else. It was reality, and it is one, the garment only of it is dead. The essence of it lives through all times and eternity. It lives undeniably and has settled in all its eradicable strength and power in the Asiatic Aryan heart from the third race direct through the first, mind-born sons, the fruits of I'm not going to get this name right, and it's pissing me the F off. Prasyatsky, as till rolled up the high caste of initiates, produced but rarely from age to age such perfect creatures, beings apart inwardly through the same and those who produce them outwardly, while in infancy of the third primitive race, quote, a creature of a more exalted kind was waiting yet, and therefore was designed, conscious of thought and more capricious breast, for empire formed and it fit to rule the rest, end quote. It was called into being a ready and perfect vehicle for the incarnating Dianzans of higher spheres, who took forthwith their abodes in these forms, both of spiritual will and the natural divine power in man. It was a child of pure spiritual, mentally unalloyed with any tincture of earthly element. Its physical frame alone was of time and of life. As it drew its intelligence direct from above, it was the living tree of divine wisdom, and may therefore be likened to the mundane tree of the Norse legend, which cannot wither or die until the last battle of life shall be fought, while the roots are gnawed all the time by the dragon Nighthog, forever so, the first and holy son of Prasyatsky, and his body gnawed by the tooth of time, but the roots of his inner being remain forever undecaying and strong, because they grew and expanded in heaven, not on earth. He was the first of the first, and he was the seed of the others. There were other sons of Prasadi, produced by the second spiritual effort, but the first one has remained to this day seed of divine knowledge, the one of the supreme among the terrestrial sons of wisdom. Of this subject, we can say no more except to add that in every age, even in our own, there have been great intellects who have understood the problem correctly. How come our physical body to the state of perfection is it found in now? Through millions of years of evolution, of course, yet never through or from animals as taught by materialism. For as Carlyle says, the essence of our being, the mystery in us that calls itself I, what words have we for such a thing? It is the breath of heaven. The highest being reveals himself in man, this body, these faculties, the life of ours. It is not all as vesture for the unnamed. The breath of heaven, or rather the breath of life, called the Bible Neshef, is in every animal, in every animate speck, as in every mineral atom. But none of these has, like man, the consciousness of nature of the highest being, as none has the divine harmony in form which man possesses. It is of Novellus said, and no one since has said it better and repeatedly by Carlyle. There is but one temple in the universe, and that is the body of man. Nothing is holier than that form. We touch heaven when we lay our hand on our human body. This sounds like a mere flourish of rhetoric, adds Carlyle, but it is not so. If well meditated, it will return out to be scientific fact, the expression of the actual truth of things. We are the miracle of miracles, the great inscrutable mystery. And that, my friends, ends that stanza. We're going to move on to stanza 7. Woohoo! Sending each and every one of you love and light. There's a lot to digest with that, and I do apologize for the pronunciations. I'm still working on it all, guys. Have a great weekend. Be safe, be seen. Have a good Halloween if you celebrate. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.